Picture this. It's the dawn of the 15th century. Europe is a powder keg of ambition, with kings and merchants and dreaming of untold riches from the mysterious East. Spices that could preserve food and cure ailments. But the paths to Asia are choked by hostile empires, endless deserts, and cutthroat middlemen. What if I told you one overlooked nation on the fringes of the known world cracked the code? A secret sea route around the massive continent of Africa, guarded like a state secret, that catapulted a tiny kingdom into a global superpower. But secrets have a way of unraveling, and when this one did, it triggered a cascade of wars, betrayals, and collapses that reshaped the world. If you're hooked on history that reads like a blockbuster thriller, you're in the right place. Hit that like button if you're ready to uncover the full story. Let's embark on this journey together. Trust me, by the end, you'll see how one hidden path changed everything from your morning coffee to global politics. To grasp the magnitude of Portugal's secret, we have to set the stage in the turbulent world of the late Middle Ages. Europe was emerging from the Black Death, with populations rebounding and appetites for luxury goods exploding. The Ottoman Turks had captured Constantinople in 1453, slamming the door on the traditional Silk Road and jacking up prices for Asian imports. Pepper from India, cloves from the Malaccas, silk from China. All of these weren't just considered commodities, they were the Bitcoin of their day, symbols of wealth and power. Venice and Genoa controlled the Mediterranean trade, but they relied on Arab and Ottoman intermediaries who took a massive cut of the profits. And this is where Portugal enters. A rugged seafaring nation born from the Reconquista, the centuries-long push to expel Muslim rulers from the Iberian Peninsula. With a coastline battered by the Atlantic and a population of barely 1 million souls, which is smaller than many modern cities today, Portugal wasn't a natural powerhouse. But they had grit, innovative shipbuilding, aka the caravel, a nimble vessel that could sail against the wind. And they had a visionary leader, Prince Henry the Navigator. Born in 1394, Henry wasn't your typical royal playboy. He was a devout crusader with a scientific bend. He was obsessed with expanding Christendom and finding Prester John, the legendary Christian king in Africa who could ally against Islam. In 1415, Henry spearheaded the conquest of Ceuta in North Africa, a Muslim stronghold that gave Portugal a taste of exotic trade, but also revealed maps and tales from Arab merchants about lands beyond the Sahara. And this is where Henry smelled opportunity. He established a naval base at Sagres in southern Portugal, a secretive hub that's often romanticized as a school of navigation, but it was more like a medieval R&D lab. Here, under a cloak of secrecy, Jewish and Italian cartographers, astronomers, and sailors collaborated. They studied ancient texts like Ptolemy's geography and vague reports from explorers who had ventured south. Secrecy in this mission was paramount. Henry issued papal orders, the Dum de Versas, in 1452, granting Portugal exclusive rights to African exploration and slave trading. Yes, the dark underbelly of this era included the start of the Atlantic slave trade, with Portugal raiding West African coasts for labor. Expeditions pushed down the coast. Madeira in 1419, the Azores in 1427, Cape Bojador in 1434, which served as a psychological barrier where sailors feared sea monsters and boiling waters. Each voyage brought back gold, ivory, and slaves. But the real prize was knowledge. Detailed charts of currents and winds, as well as safe harbors. Henry died in 1460 without reaching India, but his successors doubled down. King Afonso V continued the push, but it was John II, ascending in 1481, who turned secrecy into an art form. John was a master intriguer, nicknamed the Perfect Prince for his cunning. He centralized control, executing nobles who opposed him and creating a network of spies. In 1487, he dispatched Pero da Covilhã and Afonso de Pavia on a covert overland mission. Disguised as Arab merchants, they traveled through Jerusalem, Arabia, and into India and East Africa. They finally reached Calicut, the spice hub, and sent back encrypted reports confirming the Indian Ocean's accessibility. He even learned of the monsoon winds that could propel ships eastward. And all of this information was kept classified. Leakers faced execution or even exile. Why? Because rivals like Spain were sniffing around, funding their own explorers like Columbus. The pivotal moment arrived somewhere in between 1487 and 1488 with Bartolomeu Dias, a seasoned captain from a noble family. Dias was tasked with probing Africa's southern extremity. His fleet of 3 ships battled ferocious storms, winds howling like banshees, waves towering like mountains. They were blown off course several times, but in a stroke of luck, they rounded the Cape unknowingly. When the winds finally subsided, Dias realized they had passed into calmer waters, the Indian Ocean. He landed at what he called the Cape of Storms, erecting a small base to claim it for Portugal. Upon returning, King John optimistically renamed it to the Cape of Good Hope. But the maps, sealed within Portugal's trade ministry, did not include any engravings or publications. The rest of Europe heard rumors, but without details, no one could replicate it exactly. This secrecy paid off spectacularly. In 1497, King Manuel I, John's successor, a devout man who saw himself as God's instrument, selected Vasco da Gama for the ultimate voyage. Da Gama, a hot-headed noble with military experience, commanded 4 ships. Armed with Portugal's recent intel, they departed Lisbon amid fanfare, but with strict orders to maintain secrecy en route. The journey was hellish. 6 months to reach the Cape. Scurvy claimed lives, and mutinies started to brew. They hugged Africa's coast, trading with locals in Mozambique, sometimes peacefully, often with cannon fire when resisted. Then, the game changer. In Malindi, they hired an Arab pilot who knew the monsoons. The group crossed the Indian Ocean in just 23 days when they arrived in Calicut on May the 20th, 1498. Da Gama's first words to the Zamorian, or ruler, were, "We seek Christians and spices." He found no Christians, but he did find boatloads of spices. The return trip was brutal, another 93 days. Only 55 of the 170 crew survived. But what happened to the cargo? Pepper and cinnamon, worth 60 times the expedition's cost, all made it back. Da Gama docked secretly at first, controlling the news. Manuel wrote smug letters to Spain, but the technical details remained locked away in the Portuguese trade ministry. Now, with Portugal monopolizing the route, they didn't just trade, they built an empire on steroids. This route wasn't a territorial behemoth like later British India was. It was a network of strategic fortresses and factories controlled by controlling sea lanes. Manuel flooded the seas with annual armadas, each bigger than the last. And by 1503, Da Gama returned with a vengeance, bombarding Calicut to force trade deals. Another one of the architects of dominance was Afonso de Albuquerque, a brilliant but brutal strategist appointed to viceroy in 1509. He was nicknamed the Caesar of the East. He captured Socotra in 1507 to control the Red Sea, then Goa in 1510 after a savage battle where he ordered mass executions to instill fear. Goa became the Jewel, a multicultural hub blending Portuguese and Indian architecture. In 1511, he seized Malacca, the Venice of the East, choking off Asian trade routes. By 1515, Hormuz at the Persian Gulf fell, giving Portugal a stranglehold on the spice trade. They were even able to reach China, establishing Macau in 1557, introducing firearms and Christianity. This secret knowledge fueled unprecedented wealth, and Lisbon transformed into Europe's richest city. And Portugal's empire spanned 4 million square kilometers, indirectly influencing cultures around the world. You can find Portuguese words in Swahili, Indian curries with chili, originally introduced from Brazil, and global exchanges of plants, animals, and diseases via the Columbian Exchange. But it all came at a cost. Forced conversions, slave trading, and exploitation that sowed resentment. The Portuguese Empire, built on secrets, turned out to be a house of cards. The empire held together for roughly a century, but cracks started to appear. Overextension strained their small population, constant wars drained manpower, and in 1578, young King Sebastian died in the disastrous Battle of Alcacer in Morocco, which ultimately ended up leading to a succession crisis. By 1580, Spain's Philip II claimed the throne, merging the crowns in the Iberian Union. Portugal's resources then funneled into Spain's conflicts, like the 1588 Armada fiasco against England, where Portuguese ships sunk to the bottom of the sea. And the fatal blow? The secret leaked. The Dutch were able to infiltrate and started spying on the Portuguese methods by eavesdropping on sailors, copying charts, and other maps detailing routes, winds, ports, and defenses. One such spy was able to escape back to Holland, where he published the information. It was basically a modern version of How to Steal Portugal's Empire for Dummies. It included all of the precise sailing instructions and all of the secret details. Suddenly, everyone had the playbook. The Dutch, fresh from independence wars from Spain, formed the VOC, or the Dutch East India Company. The English East India Company followed in 1600, and eventually the Dutch-Portuguese War went global. The Dutch captured Amboina in 1605, blockaded Goa, seized Malacca in 1641, and Ceylon in 1658. They were even able to take parts of Brazil, while the English started nibbling away at India. Portugal tried to fight back, regaining Brazil in 1654 and regaining independence from Spain itself in 1640. but the damage was already done. Then in 1755, a ginormous earthquake hit Lisbon, a cataclysmic event killing 60,000 and destroying the city, symbolizing decline and wiping out archives and wealth. And by the time you start really getting into the 18th century, Portugal relied on Brazilian gold and diamonds. But Napoleon's invasions in 1807 forced the court to flee across the Atlantic to Rio, essentially inverting the empire. And when Brazil finally achieved independence in 1822 under Pedro I, it was basically the nail in the coffin. Moving into the 20th century, Portugal still clung to some African colonies, but had to engage in anti-colonial wars from 1961 to 1974, which further drained resources. And when Portugal experienced a revolution in 1974 and toppled its own regime, decolonization started happening rapidly in 1975. East Timor and Macau were returned in 1999. Today, Portugal's empire is cultural, with nations like Brazil still speaking Portuguese today. So, what enduring lessons does Portugal's hidden path teach us? It illustrates how innovation and secrecy can propel underdogs to greatness, which kickstarted globalization but also led to many horrors such as the slave trade. But it also warns, monopolies crumble, overreach invites rivals, and secrets erode. So what is Portugal's legacy? A reminder that history's tides are as unpredictable as the oceans they mastered. If this deep dive into Portugal's epic saga full of secrets kept you riveted, drop a comment below. What's your favorite untold historical secret? Thanks for joining the voyage, and until next time, stay curious.